The blood hit my cheek before I even registered the scream. It wasn't mine. It wasn't my mother's. It was his. And in that split second, one horrible second frozen in time, I knew nothing would ever be the same. The blood, warm and metallic, clung to my face like a cruel mark of truth. My father's strong arms had finally restrained Bernard, but it was already too late. Too late for her. Too late for all of us. My name is Lorraine Hunter. I'm 73 years old, and I live in a quiet corner of Woodstock, New York. Most people around here know me as the old woman who sells hand-stitched quilts at the town square on Saturdays, or the lady who always leaves peanut butter cookies in the library's free basket. They don't know the story I carry inside me. They don't know about the night that split my life in two. I've kept this story buried for nearly 60 years, not because I wanted to forget, but because there was no way to speak it without reliving every awful detail. But lately, I've begun to believe that silence can be just as heavy as memory. And if my story can help even one person face their pain, then it deserves to be told. So let me take you back to a time when everything still felt whole. It was the winter of 1965. I was 14 years old, and to me, our little home on Chestnut Lane was the safest place in the world. My father, Thomas Hunter, was a police officer with the Woodstock Department, disciplined, quiet, and upright to the bone. He was the kind of man who refused free coffee at the diner just to avoid the hint of favoritism. A cop should always lead by example, he used to say as he adjusted his badge with that trademark precision. My mother, Helen, was a fifth-grade teacher at the local elementary school. Everyone in town loved her. She had a way of looking you straight in the eye and making you feel like you mattered. Every morning she woke at 5 to make Dad's coffee, pack his lunch, and still managed to arrive at school before the first bell rang. She had patience like no one I've met since. We didn't have much, but we had each other and we had order. Our modest home sat on a quiet, tree-lined street where summer meant lemonade on the porch and winter meant the smell of cinnamon rolls warming the kitchen. We had a backyard filled with old apple trees, one creaky swing Dad built for me, and a small wooden shed where he kept his tools. I was an only child, not by choice, really. Mom had 3 miscarriages before the doctor told her to stop trying. So I grew up with all of their attention and all of their hopes poured into me. But don't get the wrong idea, I wasn't spoiled. Love comes with duty. Mom always reminded me as I swept the kitchen or folded laundry after school. I went to the same school where she taught, which meant I couldn't get away with anything. If I so much as rolled my eyes at a teacher, she knew before I got home. Our weekends were always the same, and I cherished that routine. Saturday mornings meant the farmer's market downtown and a visit to my grandmother's house near the edge of town. Sundays were sacred church in the morning, spaghetti for lunch, and a visit from Dad's police buddies and their families in the afternoon. It was a simple life, humble but full of warmth. I didn't know it at the time, but those days were a kind of magic, a bubble of innocence, and like all bubbles, it was bound to burst. If I close my eyes now, I can still hear the sound of my mom humming while she stirred the sauce, my dad whistling as he polished his boots. I can still feel the tickle of the wind through the bedroom window and the soft flannel of my favorite pajama top. And I can still see the way my parents looked at each other, like 2 people who truly believed they were building something good. It was that winter, bitter and windswept, that everything began to unravel. And it started, as so many tragedies do, with a single decision made from the heart, a decision that changed the course of our lives forever. That's when Bernard came into the picture. It was January 1966 when Bernard first stepped into our lives. That day, the wind howled through the trees like an animal in mourning, the kind of cold that slips through your coat and settles into your bones. My father came home later than usual, snow crusted on his boots and a strange look in his eyes, something between sorrow and determination. He barely spoke as he took off his uniform coat and sat at the kitchen table. Mom placed a bowl of stew in front of him and sat across, wiping her hands on her apron. I hovered nearby, curious. There was a call on the south end. Dad finally said, spooning the thick broth with a slow, distracted hand. Drug bust. The mother's being held for trafficking. No one knows where the father is. Mom frowned but said nothing. There was a boy there. 16. Thin as a broomstick. Quiet. Scared. But polite, too polite for what he's been through. He's going to get tossed into one of those state shelters by morning. I still remember how gently Mom reached across the table and touched his hand. What are you thinking? Thomas. He didn't answer at first, just stared into his bowl as if the answer were hidden at the bottom. I was thinking, maybe we could bring him here. That silence that followed was heavy. I felt it in my chest like a held breath. To visit, Mom asked. To stay, Dad said, lifting his eyes to hers, just for a while, until he finds a better place, maybe longer. Mom didn't answer right away. She glanced at me, then back to him. Thomas, we don't know anything about him. He's 16, I know, he said, but I saw something in him. He's smart. He wants to be something. He just needs a chance. Mom sat back. Her lips pursed. She wasn't saying no, but she wasn't saying yes either. And so began the discussion that lasted late into the night. I was mostly quiet, sitting with my knees tucked up to my chest on the living room rug, while they went back and forth at the kitchen table. Words like responsibility, safety, and trust floated through the air. Eventually, she said, let's meet him. Just meet him. One meal. A week later, Bernard came to lunch. I remember peeking through the frosty window as Dad's car pulled up the driveway. A tall, thin boy stepped out. He wore a worn gray coat too small for him and carried a paper bag folded at the top. His hair was neatly combed, and he looked around as if he wasn't sure this was real. When he entered the house, he did so like he was stepping into a cathedral, carefully, respectfully. His brown eyes flicked across the living room furniture, the fireplace, the clock ticking softly on the mantel. His expression wasn't quite awe, it was more like reverence, like he was afraid that if he touched anything, it would vanish. Mom welcomed him warmly. You must be Bernard. I'm Helen. This is Lorraine. Ma'am, he said, nodding. Miss. His voice was soft, with a touch of something southern in it. Mississippi. Maybe. I noticed the way he didn't look directly at anyone. His eyes stayed down, his back slightly hunched, like he was trying to take up less space. We sat down to eat. Roast chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans, cornbread. Bernard took small bites, chewed slowly, as if he was afraid the food might disappear. Every time Mom passed a dish, he hesitated before accepting it. Thank you, ma'am, he said more than once, almost like a reflex. You can have more if you're hungry, Mom told him gently. There's plenty. He looked up and gave the smallest smile I'd ever seen. Yes, ma'am. Thank you. That smile changed him. For a brief moment, the tiredness melted from his face, and I saw a glimpse of a boy not beaten down by the world, just a boy. After lunch, Bernard helped Dad bring in firewood from the shed. He offered to sweep the porch, asked if he could help with the dishes. Mom insisted he sit and rest. When he left that afternoon, he shook both their hands and thanked them again. In the quiet that followed, Mom stood by the sink, staring out at the snow-covered backyard. "He's been through something," she finally said. "Yes," Dad replied, "but he hasn't let it harden him." The next Sunday, Bernard came again, then the next. Slowly, he began to spend more time with us, helping Dad clean tools in the garage, asking me questions about school, occasionally helping Mom chop vegetables in the kitchen. He told us he wanted to be a mechanic, said he liked figuring out how things worked. He kept a small notebook filled with diagrams, engines, pulleys, gears. Dad found a local auto shop willing to take him on Saturday mornings. Bernard came home with grease on his hands and a light in his eyes. "Mr. Allen said I have potential," he told us proudly. 3 months after that first lunch, the papers were signed. Bernard moved into the spare bedroom at the back of the house. We bought a new mattress, a desk, a second-hand radio from the thrift store. Mom baked a chocolate cake with "Welcome Home, Bernard," written in blue frosting. He cried when he saw it. Not just teared up, he cried, full-bodied. "No shame. I never had a real room before," he said, looking around. "I never had a bed that was just mine." That night, my parents stayed up late talking in hushed voices. I listened from the hallway. I couldn't catch every word, but I heard this: "I think he's going to be good for us." Dad said. Mom didn't respond right away. Then, softly, "I hope so." I returned to my room, unsure what to feel. A part of me was curious. Another part, something small and tight in my chest, wasn't sure. Not yet, but I wanted to believe. I wanted to believe we had done something good. I wanted to believe he was the brother I never had. And for a little while, I did. At first, it was just little things. Bernard had been living with us for nearly a month when I noticed the way he looked at my mother. It wasn't obvious. If you didn't know what to look for, you'd never catch it. But I did. It was in the way his eyes lingered just a second too long when she bent to pick something up or when she leaned over the sink, rinsing dishes. It wasn't the look of a son admiring a mother figure. No, it was possessive, almost hungry. One morning, I caught it clear as day. I'd come downstairs early, unable to sleep. The sun hadn't yet come up, and the kitchen lights cast a warm yellow glow against the walls. Mom stood at the counter, humming as she poured hot water into the percolator. Bernard was already there, standing quietly across from her, his hands folded in front of him. "You didn't have to get up this early." "Bernard," she said with her usual sweetness. "I like it," he answered. "I like being alone with you." My stomach twisted. Something about the way he said it, it wasn't right. "Mr. Thomas and Lorraine, they don't understand you like I do," he added in a voice too soft to be innocent. Mom gave a polite laugh. "That's silly. We're a family." There was a beat of silence before Bernard said something I would never forget. "I didn't have anything before. Now I have you. Not you all. Not this family. Just you." When I stepped into the room and greeted them like nothing was wrong, Bernard's expression shifted instantly. The softness vanished. His mouth curled into his usual tight smile, and his voice brightened like a stage actor slipping into character. "Morning. Lorraine. Want some coffee?" He reached for a mug and poured carefully. Too carefully. His hands were shaking. I accepted the cup, but my mind was racing. That look I saw just for a second when he realized I had overheard. It wasn't embarrassment. It was anger. That day at school, I told Susan, my best friend, what I saw. She laughed at first. You're just jealous. Lorraine. Jealous, I blinked, of what he's getting a lot of your parents' attention. It's normal to feel weird when someone new shows up, especially someone your age who's trying to fit in. Maybe she was right. Maybe it was just sibling tension. But the strangeness didn't stop. One afternoon, Mom mentioned at dinner that she couldn't find her favorite lipstick, then a scarf, then a framed photo of herself from college. Small things, personal things, nothing that would have raised alarm on its own. But together, it felt off. Every time she mentioned something missing, Bernard was the first to offer help. Always concerned, always attentive. I'll look for it. Mrs. Hunter, he'd say, eyes wide and voice full of sympathy. Too perfect. One Thursday in March, I got sent home early after fainting in gym class. Nobody expected me back so soon. The house was quiet. Mom was still at school. Dad wouldn't be home until 6. Bernard was supposed to be at the shop, but I heard soft footsteps and the creak of floorboards coming from my parents' room. I moved quietly down the hallway, heart pounding, and slowly pushed the door open just a crack. Bernard was inside, lying on their bed. His face was buried in Mom's pillow. Around him were her missing things, the lipstick, the scarf, a few photos, even her hairbrush. They were laid out like a shrine. He was breathing deeply, eyes closed, like he was trying to inhale her. I backed away before he could see me and fled to Susan's house, claiming I felt sick on the street. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't know what to do. What could I even say? Hey, Mom, your new son is sleeping with your pillow and hoarding your personal things. Even I wasn't sure I believed what I saw. And what if Susan was right? What if I was just imagining all of it? So I waited. I watched. That's when I noticed something else, how Bernard's behavior changed depending on who he was with. With Dad, he was the model son, polite, helpful, enthusiastic about police stories, always asking questions about duty and honor. With Mom, he was clingy, needy. He craved her affection, asked for hugs, sat too close on the couch. It made me uncomfortable. But Mom, bless her heart, just thought he was starved for maternal love. With me, he oscillated. Some days he acted like a protective older brother. Other days, he ignored me completely. And every once in a while, I caught glimpses of something darker. A flash of anger when I got praise at school. A clenched jaw when Dad ruffled my hair at the dinner table. One night, after I aced an English exam, Mom bragged about it to Dad at dinner. Bernard smiled. But under the table, I heard a loud snap. He'd broken his pencil in half. And then there was Romeo. Romeo was my cat. He followed me everywhere, slept at the foot of my bed, and purred like a lawnmower every time I brushed his orange fur. One morning, I found him lying motionless under the apple tree, dead. There was no blood, no wound, just his small body curled unnaturally in the frost. Dad said maybe he'd eaten something bad. Bernard, standing beside me, put a hand on my shoulder. Cats are like that, he said softly. You never know where they go or what they get into. His tone, it wasn't comforting. It was flat, cold, and there was a flicker in his eye, something amused. That was when I felt it for the first time. Not discomfort, not confusion, fear, I wish I could say that was the moment I told my parents everything. I wish I'd stood up and screamed the truth. But I didn't. I stayed silent, trapped between doubt and dread. I didn't know it then, but I was already running out of time. It was the first week of July when Clara came to stay. She was my cousin 15, just a year older than me. We hadn't seen each other in nearly 2 years, but we used to be close as little girls. Clara was visiting from Poughkeepsie for a week, something of a summer break before the next school year. She was the kind of girl everyone noticed, tall, graceful, with golden blonde hair that shimmered in the sun and green eyes that sparkled like mischief lived behind them. When Dad picked her up from the bus station, Bernard insisted on going with him. He never asked to go anywhere before, but that day he volunteered. "I'd like to help," he said. "Besides, it'll be nice to meet more of the family." When they returned, I noticed it immediately, the way Bernard's eyes locked on Clara the moment she stepped out of the car. There was a flicker in his expression, not admiration, not friendliness, hunger. He smiled that same crooked smile he used on everyone else, but something in it, something made me nauseous. Clara was cheerful and polite as always. She hugged me tight, complimented Mom's cooking, and helped dry the dishes after dinner. But by the second day, I noticed her avoiding Bernard. At first, I thought I was imagining things. Maybe she was just shy around strangers. But then she started asking to sleep in my room instead of the guest room. "You don't mind, do you?" she asked softly that night, brushing her hair at the vanity we shared. I don't like that room." I turned toward her. "Why not?" She paused, staring at her reflection for a beat too long. "Lorraine, your brother's kind of strange, isn't he?" My stomach dropped. "What do you mean?" I asked, keeping my voice low. "He watches me," she whispered, "when he thinks I'm not looking. Yesterday, I came out of the bathroom and he was just standing in the hallway. Staring, I thought of Romeo. I thought of the broken pencil. I thought of the pillow and the scarf. And now Clara. Did he do anything?" "No," she said quickly. "He hasn't touched me, but it's the way he looks at me, like he's trying to decide something." That night, I didn't sleep at all. The next morning, Clara told Mom she'd received an urgent call and needed to go home early. It was a lie. I could see it in her face, but no one questioned her. Dad was disappointed, but understanding. Mom offered to take her to the station. Clara hugged me at the door, her arms trembling. "Be careful, Lorraine," she whispered into my ear. When I turned to look at Bernard, he stood at the top of the stairs, watching her leave with a scowl barely hidden under that same polite smile. When the door shut behind her, I saw him ball his fists before disappearing into his room. That night, I heard something, rhythmic thumping, like fists hitting dry wall. I crept down the hallway and stopped at his door. The sound came in bursts, 3, 4, 5 hard punches followed by silence. Then again. The next morning, his knuckles were red and scraped. He said it happened at the shop, but Mr. Allen hadn't seen him all week. I told Susan everything. This time, she didn't laugh. "I think you need to tell your parents," she said quietly. "I've tried. Dad says I'm overreacting." Susan paused. "Then tell your mom." I wanted to. I did. But Mom had been looking so tired lately. The school year had worn her down, and the summer classes she volunteered to teach weren't helping. She came home drained every day, her shoulders sagging and her voice hoarse. Still, I decided I'd try. I waited for a quiet moment in the kitchen while she was icing cupcakes for the church fundraiser. "Mom," I began, "can I ask you something?" "Of course, sweetheart." I hesitated. "Do you ever or Chin feel uncomfortable around Bernard?" She turned toward me, brows furrowed. "What do you mean? I don't know. Like, do you ever feel like he's too close? Too intense?" She wiped her hands on a towel. "Lorraine, what's going on?" I opened my mouth, but the words tangled. It all sounded ridiculous when I tried to explain it. Feelings, glances, missing objects, the way he looked at Clara. It sounded like gossip, like teenage paranoia. I don't like the way he acts sometimes. I finished lamely. She looked at me for a long moment. "He's had a hard life, baby. We knew there'd be bumps." I nodded. "I know, but what if it's more than that?" Her lips tightened. "We'll talk to your father tonight." But we never did. That evening, Bernard was the perfect son. He offered to dry the dishes, told a joke that made Dad laugh, complimented the meatloaf like he was at a 5-star restaurant. I saw it the way Mom looked at me across the table. Her expression said, "Are you sure?" Maybe I wasn't. Until he cornered me in the hallway. It was late, nearly midnight. I'd gone to the kitchen for water. As I turned the corner near the staircase, he stepped out of the shadows like he'd been waiting for me. "You told Clara something," he said flatly. "No, I lied." "She didn't tell me anything either." He stepped closer, his body almost touching mine. "She's a liar. You know, pretty girls always are." I tried to step back, but he blocked the way. "You're watching me. Lorraine, always watching." I didn't answer. He leaned closer. "That's fine. You want to play games? We'll play. But I don't lose." Then, just like that, he smiled, stepped aside, and walked away as if nothing had happened. I stood there shaking, my throat dry, my skin clammy. He wasn't pretending anymore. I had seen something he wanted to keep hidden, and now I was in his way. The next Sunday, after church, I decided I couldn't wait any longer. Dad and I had always been close. I was his little deputy, the one he taught how to fish, how to tie a proper knot, how to keep your head clear in an emergency. I thought no. I knew he'd listen to me. So I waited for a moment when it was just the two of us. Mom had gone to visit her friend Ruth, and Bernard was supposedly at the library studying for a history test. Dad sat in his recliner, reading the Sunday paper, his coffee cooling on the table beside him. "Dad," I said, my voice trembling despite every attempt to sound calm. He looked up. "What's up?" "Kiddo, I need to tell you something." "About Bernard." He folded the paper and placed it on his lap. "All right." I stood in the center of the room, hands clenched, trying to keep my breath steady. Then I told him everything, not just the way Bernard looked at Mom or the shrine of missing items I saw on their bed. I told him about the encounter with Clara, the threats in the hallway, Romeo, the bruised knuckles, the eerie change in behavior depending on who was in the room. Dad's face went from relaxed to still, then from still to tense. His brows pulled together, his jaw tightening. When I finished, he sat back and exhaled through his nose. "Lorraine, that's a lot. I know," I said quickly, "but it's all true. I swear it. There's something wrong with him." He didn't respond at first. Then he leaned forward, elbows on knees, rubbing his temples. "Sweetheart, Bernard's had a hard life. Abandoned. Bounced around foster homes. He's trying to adjust. But this isn't just adjusting. Dad, he's not safe. You said he hasn't hurt anyone, right?" "Not yet," I whispered, That made him look up. He studied me for a long time, and I felt like I was being interviewed by the detective part of him, not the dad I knew, but the officer trained to weigh credibility, motive, risk. He sighed deeply. Look, I'm not dismissing what you're saying. I think maybe some of this could be misunderstandings. You're 14. Emotions run high. It's normal to feel protective. I felt like I'd been slapped. Dad, you don't believe me. I didn't say that. Yes, you did. You just don't want to believe it. He stood, suddenly looking older than I'd ever seen him. It was my idea to bring him here. Lorraine. I saw a kid who needed a chance. Your mother and I took a leap of faith, and now it's backfiring. Please, he said gently. Just give it time. Keep some distance. If that helps, I'll talk to him. That's not good enough. I snapped. My voice cracked, and I hated how it made me sound like a child. But I wasn't a child anymore, not after everything I'd seen. I turned and left the room before he could say anything else, tears stinging behind my eyes. That night at dinner, Bernard was all charm again. He complimented the pot roast, thanked Mom for helping him study. Not once did he look at me, but I felt the tension beneath the surface, like a power line stretched to the point of snapping. Afterward, when Dad and Bernard went outside to check on the shed, I heard their muffled voices. I pressed my ear to the window. Just be mindful, Dad was saying. Lorraine's feeling a little on edge lately. I think the school year's been stressful. Bernard's voice followed, smooth and soft. Of course, sir. I'll keep my distance if she wants. I don't want to make anyone uncomfortable. He was too good at this, too quick to play the victim, to shift the narrative. When they came back inside, Bernard gave me a little nod, as if to say, I know what you did. And the worst part, so did Dad. Later that night, as I brushed my teeth, Bernard appeared in the hallway. He leaned against the doorframe of the bathroom, arms crossed. So, he whispered, you talked to him. I didn't answer. I told you not to. My grip tightened on the toothbrush. He won't believe you. He wants me here. You think you're smart, Lorraine, but you're just a scared little girl playing detective. You're wrong, I said quietly. He's starting to see it. He smiled. You keep telling yourself that. Then he turned and walked away. That night, I locked my bedroom door for the first time, and still, I barely slept. The next few days passed like a bad dream. Bernard hovered more than usual, appearing suddenly wherever I was in the hallway, outside the bathroom, on the porch when I stepped out for air. His presence was like a storm cloud that followed me from room to room, and I could tell he was testing how far he could go, watching for cracks. One afternoon, I walked past his room and noticed the door slightly open. Inside, he was standing by his dresser, shirtless, staring into the mirror. His back was turned, but I could see red lines down his spine. Scratches, welts, I couldn't tell. He was whispering something low and rhythmic over and over again like a prayer or a chant. I stepped back before he could see me. I didn't tell my parents. What was the point? The house no longer felt like a home. It felt like a trap. And somewhere inside me, I knew the clock was ticking. November 17th, 1966. I will never forget that date. Not because I want to remember, but because I can't forget. It lives inside me, etched into every part of who I am. That was the day everything fell apart. The morning began like any other. Mom was running late. She was frazzled about a parent-teacher meeting at the elementary school. I watched her rush around the kitchen, still in her blue linen dress, brushing crumbs from the counter while balancing her coffee and her clipboard. Lorraine, can you grab my purse from the hall table? I did. She smiled, kissed my cheek, and said, I'll be home early tonight. We'll watch that silly movie you like. She walked out the front door, her heels clicking on the porch, her breath visible in the cold November air. I pressed my hand to the window as she disappeared down the street toward the bus stop. That was the last time I ever saw my mother alive. That afternoon, school was let out early for an unexpected staff assembly. I walked home, humming a tune I couldn't place, the weight of my backpack lighter than usual. It was just after 2 or p.m. when I turned the key in our front door and stepped inside. Silence. Not the normal kind, the quiet that comes when everyone's out and the house is still resting. This silence was different. It was thick, oppressive, as though the walls themselves were holding their breath. And then the smell, faint, metallic, familiar in the way a memory you don't want resurfaces without warning. Blood. I called out, Mom, Dad. Nothing. The house was dim, the air cold. I walked slowly down the hallway. My sneakers made no sound on the carpet. The door to my parents' bedroom was slightly ajar. A sliver of warm light spilled into the hallway, as if something inside still burned. I pushed it open with trembling fingers, and that's when I saw it. My mother was lying on the bed. The light blue dress she had worn that morning was soaked with dark red, her chest unmoving, her face, once so full of life, always lit with a quiet strength, was frozen in terror. Her eyes were wide, staring upward, glassy and lifeless. Her throat had been cut, clean and deep, from ear to ear. At first, I couldn't even scream. I couldn't breathe. Then I saw him. Bernard. He was sitting calmly beside the bed, in a chair pulled from the corner of the room. His hands were drenched in blood, resting in his lap as if he'd just finished painting. The kitchen knife, Mom's favorite one, the one she used for Sunday roasts, lay on the floor beside him. He didn't flinch when I entered. Instead, he looked at me and smiled. Ah. Lorraine, he said casually, like we were at breakfast, you came home early today. I couldn't answer. My eyes kept darting between my mother's lifeless body and the blood staining Bernard's hands. She came home early too, he said, nodding toward her. Said she didn't feel well. Wanted to rest before dinner. I guess now she'll rest forever. His tone was light, almost playful, like this was a game. What did you do? I whispered. Bernard tilted his head. What does it look like I did? I freed us. She was in the way, I repeated, still unable to process. She stood between me and your father, between me and you. She never really accepted me, you know. She was possessive, controlling, always acting like she was better than me, but not anymore. I backed up toward the door. He stood. I'm sorry. Lorraine, I really am. I liked you. I thought maybe we could have been happy. Just us and your dad, but you never gave me a chance. He stepped forward. I reached for the nearest object, without thinking my mother's hairbrush, but it wasn't enough. My eyes dropped to the floor. The knife. Without knowing how, I lunged and grabbed it before he could. Don't come any closer, I warned. He laughed, a dark, hollow sound that didn't match his youthful face. Or what you're going to kill me too. You don't have it in you. You're soft, just like she was. He took another step. Stop. I screamed, knife raised. His eyes were dilated, feverish. I could smell the blood on him. His breath reeked of something chemical, something sharp I didn't recognize then, but would later learn was cocaine. He lunged, and instinct took over. I drove the blade into his stomach with a scream I didn't know I was capable of making. He gasped, stumbling backward, looking down as though confused by what had just happened. "You," he began, then dropped to his knees. His blood spilled quickly, pooling across the hardwood floor and merging with the trail left by my mother. I dropped the knife and backed into the wall, breathing hard, my hands slick and trembling. I don't know how long I stood there. Time had stopped. Then I heard the front door open. My father's voice rang out cheerfully. "I'm home. Got off early today." The moment he entered the room, everything shattered. I'll never forget the sound he made, a sound that wasn't human. He fell to his knees, screaming my mother's name over and over again. Bernard, still alive somehow, reached for him. She stabbed me. He wheezed. "Help." I pointed at my mother. "He killed her. Dad, he killed her." Then Bernard pulled something from beneath the mattress. A gun. My father's backup pistol hidden for emergencies. He raised it toward Dad. Dad moved fast. Years of training kicked in. He wrestled the weapon from Bernard's hand just as the first shot rang out, missing his chest by inches and embedding in the wall behind him. There was a struggle, bodies thrashing. My father finally overpowered him. One final shot. Bernard went still. 2 bodies lay in that room now. 2 people whose lives had collided with ours so differently and ended in blood. My father dropped the gun as if it burned his hand. He sat there, breathing ragged, staring at the destruction. That's how the police found us. Neighbors had called after hearing the gunshots. When the officers arrived, they found me in the hallway, blood on my face and hands, still unable to speak. They found my father hunched beside my mother, gently stroking her hair. In the hours that followed, our home became a crime scene yellow tape, camera flashes, questions I couldn't answer. The headlines would say, "Adopted teen murders, foster mother, dies in police struggle." But that wasn't the whole story. It was only the beginning. The police stayed in our house until after midnight. I remember sitting in the back of an ambulance, wrapped in a scratchy wool blanket, even though I wasn't cold. A paramedic tried to check my vitals, but I couldn't stop staring at my hands still stained with Bernard's blood. No matter how many times I wiped them, the red remained. My father sat nearby, silent and pale. His eyes never left the front door of our house, the home we had built, loved, and now lost. In the days that followed, the investigation unfolded like a nightmare with no end. At first, it was just a flood of questions. Detectives from the state came, social workers, reporters. Everyone wanted to know the same thing. How did this happen? And slowly, the truth about Bernard unraveled thread by thread until the picture it revealed was far more terrifying than anything we could have imagined. Bernard had not been the innocent, unlucky orphan we thought he was. He wasn't from a broken home with a mother in jail. That part was a lie. His biological mother had been murdered 3 years earlier, stabbed repeatedly in the kitchen of her trailer in upstate New York. There had been whispers back then. Neighbors told police her teenage son was off, that he'd been seen covered in blood the night she died, but no charges were filed. The system labeled it a home invasion gone wrong, and Bernard was shuffled into foster care. He'd been adopted and rejected by 5 families before us. Each one returned him to the system, citing disturbing behavior harming animals, setting small fires, disappearing at night. One foster parent found her 9-year-old daughter locked in a closet, crying, after Bernard had accidentally closed the door. Another reported him standing over their infant's crib in the middle of the night, just watching. All of this was in his file. A thick manila envelope full of red flags that should have been reviewed before anyone brought him into another home. But it never made it to my father. Clerical error, they said. Misfiled paperwork. Delays in cross-county records. My father was a respected officer. He had connections. He trusted the system. He believed he'd done all the right things. But the system had failed us all. In Bernard's room, they found a notebook, not for school. This one was filled with journal entries, violent fantasies, drawings of our family, me, Dad, Mom with our eyes scratched out in pen, pages of detailed plans how to stage my father's suicide, how to accidentally kill the family cat, how to isolate me. There was even a list of people to blame if things went wrong. My name was at the top. The detectives asked if I wanted to see it. I said no, but Dad did. He spent nearly 3 hours in the police station, reading every word. When he came out, he looked 10 years older. He fooled me, he said in a cracked voice. He fooled all of us. They ruled my actions as self-defense. They said my father acted appropriately in the line of duty. There were no charges. But that didn't bring my mother back. It didn't take away what I'd done, and it didn't stop the guilt from burying itself inside us. The press caught wind of the story. It hit the local papers first, then statewide. Adopted teen kills, foster mother in quiet town tragedy. Family torn apart by system's failure. Neighbors we'd known for years avoided eye contact. The house, our once warm, safe Cherrywood home, was now a place no one wanted to drive past. We sold it within weeks. We moved into a small 2-bedroom apartment across town, tucked behind a gas station and a shuttered bakery. It was quiet, forgettable, just the way we wanted it. My father left the force on extended leave. I didn't go back to school right away. Not because anyone told me not to, but because I couldn't. I couldn't sit in a classroom and pretend like I hadn't seen death, like I hadn't caused it. Dad tried to hold us together, but I could see the cracks forming. He blamed himself for bringing Bernard into our home, for not listening to me, for not protecting Mom. But what he didn't know, and what I couldn't yet tell him, was that I blamed myself too. I saw the signs. I knew, and I said nothing until it was too late. The silence in that apartment was unlike anything I'd known. It wasn't just quiet, it was hollow, like the echo inside a church long after the congregation had left. We lived in that silence, Dad and I, for weeks after Mom's funeral. Not because we didn't want to talk, but because we didn't know how. I'd wake up in the middle of the night gasping, hearing echoes of her scream that I wasn't even sure I'd ever actually heard. I'd tiptoe to the kitchen and find my father sitting in the dark, a glass of whiskey sweating in his hand, his eyes red and vacant. He never said much, just stared out the window like he was waiting for someone who was never going to come back. During the day, he went through the motions, laundry, groceries, sweeping the porch. He still made coffee for both of us each morning, placing my mug beside the toast I could never bring myself to eat. "How are you feeling today, sweetheart?" He'd ask in a voice that tried to sound normal. Okay, I'd answer, every time, a lie we both accepted. The pain wasn't loud anymore. It was quiet and constant, a dull ache that seeped into everything. I stopped going outside unless I had to. At school, when I finally returned, people whispered when I passed by. Some offered awkward condolences. Others avoided me altogether. But it was Dad I worried about most. He stopped shaving. He stopped eating. And then, one morning, I found him sitting at the kitchen table surrounded by papers, police files, Bernard's case notes, printed records he'd requested from different counties. He had circled names, dates, and typed pages until the ink bled through. I should have seen it, he murmured without looking up. Dad, it's all here. Lorraine, it was always here. He wasn't the first family he did this to, and I still brought him home. I welcomed him to your mother's table. I gave him a bed down the hall from my daughter. He wasn't angry at the system anymore. He was angry at himself. In the following weeks, things got worse. He started staying out later, telling me he was taking walks, though he always came home smelling like gin. The bottle of painkillers in the bathroom kept getting lighter, though neither of us was sick. Once, I came home from school and found him sitting on the floor of the hallway, clutching a photograph of Mom, her wedding picture, and sobbing so hard he couldn't breathe. I knelt beside him, wrapping my arms around his shaking frame. It was the first time he let himself fall apart in front of me. I failed her, he whispered. I failed you. No, I said, even though I wasn't sure I believed it. You tried to help someone. You didn't know, but I should have. And then came the worst day of my life. Worse than the day I found Mom. Worse than the day I held a knife and stabbed someone to survive. It was the day I came home and found the bathroom door locked. I called for him. No answer. I knocked. Nothing. I pounded the door until my hands hurt. Still nothing. So I did the only thing I could think to do. I ran to the kitchen, grabbed the emergency screwdriver from under the sink, and jimmied the old lock until it popped. What I found still wakes me up some nights. My father was in the bathtub, fully clothed, his wrists slit, water red around him. A single candle burned on the counter. The radio was playing an old Elvis song. For a few horrible seconds, I thought I was too late. Then I saw the slight rise and fall of his chest. He was still breathing. I screamed for help, calling 911 with hands slick and trembling. I pressed towels to his wrists and begged him to stay awake. Please, Daddy, please don't leave me. Not you, too. At the hospital, they stabilized him. The doctors said he would recover physically, but the emotional damage, that would take time. He spent 2 weeks in a psychiatric unit. During that time, I stayed with Susan's family. Her parents treated me like a lost child who had stumbled onto their porch and didn't know how to ask for help. They never pried, just offered me warm meals, soft blankets, and quiet kindness. When Dad was discharged, he came home with a bottle of antidepressants and a schedule of therapy appointments. But something in him was still broken. He apologized again and again. I wasn't thinking about you, Lorraine, he said one evening, voice low with shame. I just wanted the pain to stop. I thought you'd be better off without me. I took his hand. No, I said. You're all I have left. Don't ever leave me like that again. And for the first time since that bloody November afternoon, he looked me in the eye. I promise, he whispered. I'll try. Healing didn't come all at once. It came in fits and starts like spring in upstate New York. A warm day followed by snow. A burst of sunlight followed by gray skies again. But slowly, painfully, my father and I began to climb out of the hole we'd fallen into. After his hospitalization, Dad committed to his therapy. Twice a week, he sat with a kind but firm woman named Dr. Evelyn Parks. He didn't like it at first. He said it made him feel exposed, ashamed, but he kept going because he had promised me he would, and I started therapy too. Dr. Evelyn recommended someone for me, a trauma counselor who specialized in adolescent grief and PTSD. Her name was Marcia Delgado. She wore thick-rimmed glasses and had a soft, unhurried voice that made me feel like I could breathe again. In her office, I could finally say the things I hadn't said aloud. I still see him when I close my eyes. I miss her so much I can't think straight. I hate myself for surviving when she didn't. And one day, trembling, I stabbed someone, and I can't decide if I regret it or not. Marcia never flinched, never judged. She listened, and little by little, I let go of the shame I'd been carrying. At home, things were still fragile, but we tried. On Sundays, we made pancakes just like Mom used to. Dad burned the first few. I spilled the syrup once and cried over it like it was the end of the world. But we laughed through our tears, and that laugh felt like a rebellion against everything we'd lost. We went back to church, too. Not every week, but enough. The pastor never mentioned the headlines or the tragedy. He just nodded at us when we walked in, like we belonged. That small gesture meant more than I can explain. Susan remained my anchor. She'd come over after school with chocolate bars and gossip from class, pretending life was normal until I started believing parts of it were. Her family became a second home. Her dad, Charles, even helped fix the leaky pipe under our kitchen sink one Saturday, like it was nothing at all. By the time spring rolled in, I started thinking about the future. One afternoon, I told Dad I wanted to go to college. He blinked. Really? Yes. I said, I want to study psychology because of what happened, because I want to help people the way Marcia helped me. He looked down at his hands. Your mother would have been so proud of that. I know, I whispered. So would you. He reached across the table and squeezed my hand. I am, Lorraine, more than I can say. We spent the summer rebuilding not just our lives, but our bond. We went on long walks through the woods, planted flowers in old pots on the apartment balcony, and visited the cemetery every Sunday with fresh lilies. Each time, I'd sit by Mom's headstone and talk to her in whispers about school, about dreams, about how much I still needed her. Sometimes I'd find Dad sitting in the car afterward, staring straight ahead. Other times, he'd join me and say nothing at all, just place a hand on my shoulder. That was enough. By the fall of 1967, I was accepted into SUNY New Paltz. It wasn't far less than an hour from Woodstock, but it felt like a world away. My first week on campus. I called Dad every evening, sometimes just to hear his voice, sometimes to cry. But slowly, I found my rhythm. I joined a student support group. I began tutoring other students struggling with their studies. And for the first time since that dark winter, I felt useful, capable, alive. Dad came to visit once a month. He always brought something homemade lasagna, a book he thought I'd like, a framed photo of Mom he'd found in an old drawer. You're doing it, he said one evening after dinner in the dorm lounge. You're really healing. I'm trying. I told him. Some days are harder than others. He smiled, a little sad, a little proud. That's what healing looks like. Kiddo, you keep going, even when it hurts. Before he left that night, he handed me a small box. Inside was a gold necklace, simple, elegant, with a heart-shaped locket. It was your mother's, he said. She wanted to give it to you on your 18th birthday. I found it in her dresser drawer a few weeks ago. I held it in my palm like it was the most fragile thing in the world. She'd be proud of you too, you know, he added, for surviving, for helping me survive. I hugged him hard, and for the first time in a long time, I believed him. It's been 65 years since that November afternoon shattered my world. I still live in Woodstock, though not in that apartment. I've made a home here, filled it with warmth, photographs, quiet laughter, and books stacked 2 and 3 deep on every shelf. My father passed away in 1998, peacefully, in his sleep, after many years of sobriety, therapy, and being the kind of father every broken girl dreams of. He never remarried. He told me once, "Your mother was it for me, sweetheart. I loved her with everything I had." I believe him. He died with her photograph still on his nightstand and a note in his drawer that simply said, "Tell Lorraine I did my best." And he did. After college, I followed the path I promised I would. I became a psychologist, opened my own practice here in town. I've counseled hundreds of survivors, women, men, children, each carrying scars no one else could see. Some came in silence, some in rage, but all came with the same fragile hope I once had that healing was possible. I told them the truth, that healing doesn't mean forgetting. It means learning to live again with the memory. I never remarried, never had children of my own, but I've mentored dozens of young women through the years, foster girls, troubled teens, the ones society writes off. Each one reminded me of who I used to be. Each one made me feel like maybe my pain hadn't been for nothing. I still wear my mother's necklace every day. And on the first snowfall each year, I visit her grave with a thermos of hot cocoa and a yellow lily. I sit there in the quiet and whisper all the things I still wish I could say, that I made it, that I helped others make it too, that I never let Bernard's darkness become my own. You see, when you survive something like that, people expect you to be grateful, to move on. But no one tells you how heavy it is to carry survival when you've lost so much in the process. What I've learned, what I hope you take away from my story is this: you are not defined by the worst thing that ever happened to you. You are not your scars. You are not your shame. You are not what they did to you. You are the breath you chose to take the morning after it all burned down. You are the cup of coffee you poured when your hands were still shaking. You are the moment you reached for help, and the day you offered it to someone else. There will always be darkness in this world, but we get to choose whether we let it define us or whether we rise, again and again, with hearts cracked wide open and still beating. That's the legacy I want to leave behind. Not just that I survived, but that I lived, and maybe, just maybe, that I helped someone else believe they could too. If you've made it to the end of this story, thank you. Truly, this wasn't just a story about tragedy. It was a story about endurance, about healing, about the quiet, stubborn power of love. And maybe it was a story you needed. Maybe you've lived through your own storm, carrying a past no one sees. If so, I want you to know you are not alone. You are not broken. You are still here. And that means there's still time to reclaim your joy, your peace, your voice. If this story moved you, if it reminded you of someone you love or someone you were, please share your thoughts in the comments. Let your voice be heard. And if you believe stories like mine deserve to be told, to be remembered, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Every like, every comment, every subscription helps bring these stories into the light where healing begins. Until next time, take care of yourself. You matter.